Well, with the lifting of pandemic mandates in Ontario and in other jurisdictions around the world, the Canadian travel and tourism industry is pushing for the federal government to remove what they call non-science-based obstacles to international travel by April the 1st. At a news conference this morning, a group of industry leaders called specifically for the removal of pre-departure rapid antigen tests for fully vaccinated travelers, noting that the government's travel restrictions discourage international companies from traveling into Canada, create financial burdens for them, do not offer flexibility, and also complicate business planning. Joining us tonight, Nancy Tudorish, Regional VP with the Global Business Travel Association, Scott Beck, President and CEO of Destination Toronto, and Jan De Silva, President and CEO of the Toronto Region Board of Trade. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here. Nancy, I will start with you. We have talked a lot on this program about how hard hit the travel and tourism industry has been in the last 2 years. In terms of this timeline, April the 1st, you ask for non-science-based obstacles to be removed, so rapid antigen tests. What about masking?
Yeah, well, masking is certainly a tool that needs to be assessed further as we continue to look at what's happening. And, science is important. So we will follow the science as it comes to understanding how transmission will continue to play, a role in our communities and a role in travel. So masking is something that will be watched very closely. But as far as the removal of the testing goes, that, our focus is really to start to eliminate the barriers so we can be competitive on a global scale. There are countries that are coming online day after day, removing these testing barriers, and Canada needs to be competitive in that realm.
Isn't a rapid antigen test, just to make sure I have this clear, that is science-based, but the concern that you have is this is hindering travel. There is a cost, there is a time period to wait for the results. It depends on where you travel in the world, but it is the return to Canada that is causing the concern.
Absolutely. So when you think about travelers coming into the country, if they're originating in their home destination, they probably have a good sense of where they can have their tests done. But it's also another layer that they need to plan into their overall scheduling. When you're thinking about travelers who are returning back to Canada, they too need to source out where are reliable testing vendors, how can they get their results back in the time frame that's required. And while, yes, antigen tests are certainly a lot more accessible, there's still another layer of burden that's added into a traveler's overall journey when they're coming back into Canada.
Okay, well, Scott Beck, President and CEO of Destination Toronto. Tomorrow is anticipated to be the busiest travel day at Pearson Airport since the start of the pandemic. In saying that, we understand that here in this country, the travel industry is only seeing about 30% in terms of travel compared to pre-pandemic levels. It's only at about 30% what we saw in 2019. How much of an impact is the rapid antigen test having to people when we look at people who are taking off and returning for March break, or is it really having as much of an impact as we may think?
Yeah, absolutely, and probably more than you suspect in certain segments. For a leisure traveler, it's very different, and the time and the energy that they expend during travel is very different than for business travel, and especially for the meetings and events industry. And we're not challenging the science of the antigen test. We're challenging the science that is not there about curbing the spread of the pandemic. There is no scientific basis that pre-departure rapid antigen testing helps stop the spread of the pandemic. That's what our challenge is.
I see.
And to have our industry uniquely positioned as the only industry that has these burdens is not science-based. And so what we're asking is that we be treated like all other businesses, remove the pre-departure testing. If you can imagine, you have a group of 4,000 scientists coming to town. When they depart to go home, it's not just one test at Longo's. This is 4,000 people that require testing to be done before they depart. That is very onerous, and that's the type of stuff that is a huge hurdle to us getting back to pre-pandemic levels around business, and especially the meetings and events industry.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that in terms of the feelings you have about the science of the matter. I know when I often check the Government of Canada's website, even throughout the pandemic, as to what level of positivity occurred from those who had traveled, in terms of the Canadian numbers, it was always quite low. I think at the height it was at 2%, in terms of 2% of all cases. However, the numbers that is quite large is the unknown category. So it is tough to say, in terms of the Canadian government's numbers, the true number of the impact, really, that travel is having in terms of positive cases. But at this point, with so many people vaccinated and really people wanting to get up and travel once again, Jen, if you can elaborate onto how much longer should these mandates be in place? I know the group as a whole, the roundtable that had a news conference today, is asking for April the 1st. So you support that?
Oh, absolutely. We've made so much progress in turning the pandemic into something that's much more endemic, where it's going to be much more commonplace and not the crisis that it's created for the healthcare system. So it's time to get our business community positioned for reopening. And the business visitor economy, as Scott mentioned, is a critical part of the customer base for our downtown Toronto businesses. So it's really critical for reopening and recovery to take place, for us to start opening our doors again, to accept vaccinated travelers on a much easier way to get into our country, into our market, into our stores and retailers.
We know that Canada, specifically here in Ontario, we've taken a cautious approach, but we are seeing finally the lifting of remaining mandates here in Ontario. Of course, travel, in terms of boarding a plane, that is federal jurisdiction. Nancy, what conversations, or what is the latest that, in terms of any insight you've received from the federal transport minister on this request?
Sure. Well, there's certainly been some very positive feedback, and we're looking forward to some excellent news that will come in the short term. But we have to continue to look at how other jurisdictions are handling this and encourage our government to make the right steps, take the right actions, so that we can also have a very successful reopening plan that's done in a safe and very productive way for our country, for our citizens.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, I know I asked you about masking, Nancy, but do you think masking is something we will see perhaps even indefinitely on flights? I mean, you are on a flight with people from potentially all around the world in very close proximity. What do you think about that?
Well, masks are a tool, and as far as we're following the science and following what's happening with whether it be Omicron variant or any other variants that may happen to come across, we need to be very careful and understand what the transmission levels are. And masks are a tool, so they may be here for a shorter term, they may be here for a little bit longer, but they're certainly something that we can all learn to adapt to as necessary and when necessary.
And really, there's no real cost to masks. I mean, in terms of a real expense, when you consider you might have a cloth mask that you wash that you've had for ages, and disposable masks are fairly inexpensive, but a rapid antigen test could cost you $50 to $100, right? Per person.
Absolutely.
Quite expensive
Absolutely.
for families. Scott, Jen, I'm going to put this question to you. We are finally seeing this recent announcement from Mayor John Tory that, sort of celebrate Toronto, I think was the theme. It's returning. The idea that the Canadian National Exhibition is coming back, the Caribbean Carnival, Taste of the Danforth. When we take a look at some events that really attract people from, let's say, south of the border, like the Caribbean Carnival, what kind of impact will the continuation of rapid antigen tests for cross-border travel have if this is not something that the federal government wraps up soon? What kind of impact will that have on tourism in this city?
It will restrict it. I mean, these kind of regulations are not helpful. I mean, that's the kind of the simplest way to say that. But you talked about airplanes, and I'd question you, Christina, what would be the difference between an airplane seat versus standing at History in a concert with 3,000 people, or going to the Scotiabank Arena? There's this idea that travel somehow is uniquely going to help or encourage this part of the pandemic when we know that's not true. And so when we put hurdles in front of visitors, it makes it more difficult. Anything that we can do to look like we're open for business, be open for business, and extend that warm community welcome to people is where we need to be.
And that's the thing. If I can leave you with the final comment, Jen, the concern is open for business. Certainly, people can choose on their own if they want to come here for tourism, and if they can pay the cost of the rapid antigen test, let's say. But in terms of businesses that have to plan things, that have to make arrangements, that have to ensure that their employees or staff that they're on a return trip don't test positive, this is a big expense. It does not offer for a lot of flexibility, and it is hurting the economy. Do you have some numbers in terms of that impact?
Well, absolutely. Pre-COVID, 28 million visitors were coming into the city of Toronto annually. 60% of them were business visitors. So that's about 2.5 million customers a month coming into the city of Toronto. So eliminating the need for this kind of testing is going to create much more of a welcoming environment for business travelers to get back into the city. And there's a tremendous amount of spending that represents for our restaurants, our retailers, all kinds of service providers, hotels, transportation lines, everything. We're at a point in the pandemic where we can handle this, and it's time to show that we're open for business. So this is critical for us. We're fully on board.
Okay, we'll end on that note. Jan, Scott, Nancy, thank you so much. We'll be watching this, and we know you'll keep us posted as well. And I think, Scott, as you said best, the travel industry, there's been this feeling, you know, as you said, you go to a concert soon, you won't need a mask, you jump on a plane, you will. Of course, they're under very different jurisdictions, but in terms of how the government operates. But as you said, hoping for the best for your industry. It's certainly been a difficult time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.